Okay, here we are, recording again. So, again, I'm in Hero Lab because I spent entirely too much money on this. So, I'm going to use it, by God. Turn off all this nonsense, because it's nonsense. Alright, there we go. That's the way. That's fine. So, what I want to do is speak just a little bit more specifically than I did last time. Um, So basically, what I want to do is break this character creation process down into a number of pieces and then go over each piece individually on its own, and hopefully that will alleviate a lot of the disfluencies and time spent staring intently at a window without saying anything. And I actually want to start. Theoretically, the first choice you make is um, your class, but that's only kind of true for me. Generally, the first thing I decide is what the purpose of the character will be, right? But if I decide I'm going to be a cat burglar, that doesn't mean I'm going to be a thief. I might be a sorcerer or a ninja, um, or vigilante is a thing, investigator. Um, there's options. I bet monk would make a great thief, actually. So, not really. We're not going to get into that too much right now. What I want to do is look at races. So, basically, the assumption that I make anytime that I am making a character is that whatever my prime requisite is, I'm going to apply my +2 to that as a human. I'm assuming that I start as a human. So if I'm a strength-based fighter, I'm going to apply that +2 to strength. If I'm a ranged fighter, it's going to be dexterity. If I'm a spellcaster, it's going to go to my spellcasting stat. Right? This all makes perfect sense. It's almost never going to go into Constitution. Um, it's just Constitution. Even for like Barbarian, who or what's the other one? Blood Rager. Um, I mean, more hit points is nice, but it really just gets me an one single extra round of rage, and it's not that hard to get a good amount of rage anyway. So, whatever. Who cares? But we do make the assumption that we're starting off as a human, and as a human, +2 to one ability score, a bonus feat, and skilled, which, as I recall, gives me just one bonus skill point every level. Yeah, which is great. I love that. I love skills. Skills are how I justify taking all kinds of actions as a character, especially knowledge skills, but any kind of skill. So more skills is more better. Um, so that's important because the way that I compare things to human is I look at all of this stuff that's associated with the race, right? So um, the +1 to one ability score isn't a big factor because I'm only going to look at races that either allow me to place that +2 where I want it anyway, or that are already in the place, right? I'm not going to make a dwarf sorcerer. Um, yeah, right, because that's -2 to charisma is terrible. Um, for a sorcerer. Um, although they get a +2 to wisdom, so that would be okay for that one specific bloodline, Empyrean or something like that. Whatever, it's not important. Point is, I don't worry about the ability modifier as much. I look at all this other stuff here: dark vision, intimidating, orc blood, orc ferocity, orcish weapon familiarity, and I try to determine how much is that stuff worth to me, and not what is it objectively worth, right? Dark vision is worth at least a feat. Um, Orcish weapon familiarity, that's a feat. Orc ferocity, that's I think 2 feats because it's basically die hard, right? So you need endurance before you can take that. So whatever. I'm not gonna go, oh, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 ish feats worth of stuff because those 4 feats don't necessarily do anything I care about, right? If I'm a sorcerer, my orcish weapon familiarity probably isn't doing me a lot of good. Um, and dark vision is going to depend on the game. If I'm anticipating being in sort of old school dungeon crawl dungeons, underground temples, and that sorts of thing, then yeah, dark vision's great. Um, Also, what level we start at will affect that, because if I start at like whatever third-ish level, I can afford a Eon torch. Maybe I just need to be second level for that. They're not that expensive, right? But if I can afford an Eon torch, the difference between dark vision and low light vision, depending on the character, is not that significant. Um, the biggest difference between dark vision and low light vision being that with low light vision, other people can see me if I can see them, and with dark vision, that exchange is not guaranteed. So, but yes, goggles and potions and wands, like there's the higher level you are, the more options you have for overcoming darkness. Um, and again, that assumes that you're going to be in a game where visibility is regularly important. So, I'm not going to go through and do my full analysis of each and every one of these races right now, but I'm just going to start by saying all of this core rulebook stuff, dwarf, elf, gnome, half elf, half orc, halfling, I don't even consider them anymore. I have passed them over so many times that I just don't consider them to be worth the time to even think about anymore. Um, with the specific exception of if I think of a character and I go, that character would be super fun to play as a dwarf, right? If I have a goal that is non-mechanical, then yeah, I'll play a dwarf. Sometimes it's fun to be a dwarf. Um, so, but other than that, if I'm just like, well, what's a race that would benefit this build? I come down here to the featured races. I deeply, deeply love the kobolds, the different color scale kobolds, and the elemental characters Ifrit, Oread, Sylph, and Undine. And I like the. I think they're down in the uncommon races, but I'll dip down here. I like the Skinwalkers. Um, the kobolds are kind of weird, right? Like it's a monstrous race, so players shouldn't generally want to be monstrous races, but whatever. They have huge strength penalty. Um, they're just kind of terrible, but I love them. And one of the reasons that I love them is because of their racial traits, their race traits, and their feats, right? So over the course of a long enough game, you can basically turn a kobold into a tiny dragonborn. And it's just a lot of fun, right? It's kind of hilarious and stupid. Um, and there's a variety of kobold that gets a breath weapon. I think if you don't start with the breath weapon, you can pick it up in a feat later. Anyway, I love all these kobold variants. I think they're great. Um, the elemental kin, Ifrit, Oread, Sylph, and Undine are basically just Pathfinder's take on the Genesee from proper D&D. They're elemental humanoids. Um, each one is flavored just enough to be interesting. There are a couple of archetypes that are related to these guys. I like the Ifrit Wishcaster. Um, it's not a super powerful. In fact, it's kind of a suboptimal sorcerer um, archetype, but I've played it before, and when somebody says "I wish" and you get to cast a spell, that's super gratifying. Um, let's see here. Oh, Oriad. Oriad, I think has great racial abilities, right? In fact, I'm going to pull them up here because they're so fantastic. So you get dark vision and you get stuff. I think there's +1 to being an cleric. Yeah, you're +1 caster level and 2 points higher charisma for sorcerers or clerics. Right, whatever. That stuff's hot garbage. But they do let's find the ones I like here. We got Ferrous Growth, which is the ability to take a piece of metal and reshape it into a different thing. That is an enormously versatile ability, right? So if I was jailed and somebody took all of my stuff and I managed to break off a piece of the jail cell, but also if I was just in shackles, if my wrists were chained together, let me just make the shackles be shaped like something else and get my hand out of it. Let me make it a sword. Now I have a weapon, even though I'm naked and in jail. Let me make it into a crowbar so I can break this door and get out. It's super good. I think it's super flavorful. Um, and I mean it's also relatively limited, right? Because it only applies up to 10 pounds. I can't just use metal shape anything. It can only affect a 10-pound object, and it only lasts for, what does it say, 10 minutes? For 10 minutes. So, like, in that prisoner's dilemma scenario, it's kind of a Hail Mary. Like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna commit to it, and if I'm not free and clear in 10 minutes, bad things are gonna happen. But it gives you a built-in ability to do something cool, which I like. I think Crystalline Form's the other one I like. Yeah, +2 to AC against ray attacks. So that's a relatively small number of arcane spells. But if somebody used a ray attack on me, I can once per day just say no. I can deflect it. So cool. I love that. So I think they make really good um, frontliners, fighters, or paladins, or probably actually. I've never played an Oriad War Priest, but that's probably where the juice is for these guys. Anyway, so those are the sort of things that I look at and I say, uh, yes, I am willing to spend a feat to be this race. And I didn't really dig down into the um, Skinwalker, but the alternate heritages of the Skinwalker, aside from allowing you to customize where your stat bonuses and penalties go, each heritage is a collection of 4 different abilities, right? So I'm a big fan of the Were Shark and the Were Tiger, because the Were Shark I think is good for a frontliner, and it can give you the ability to have a swim speed or to breathe underwater. And as Jeff knows, I, as a character who wears heavy armor, and am terrified of the water. That is a real quick way to die. Just fall off the boat. But if I can breathe underwater, or if I have a swim speed of whatever it is, 20 feet, that kind of takes that challenge off the table. And one of the other one's a bite attack, and I don't remember what the 4th ability is. So there's a bunch of stuff built into the Were Shark. That's just one heritage. I know that I think the Were Rat can get a climb speed, which is super good. The Were Tiger can get See in Darkness. That's the name of the ability. And basically, you can see in mundane or magical darkness, period. Darkness does not affect you anymore. And the ability to turn that on and off, I think, is really fun. And a couple of the races or heritages get Scent as an ability. So the ability to switch in and out of having Scent, I think, is really fun. I think they're great. I love them. But what might be slightly less obvious is how I feel about the Aasimar and the Tiefling. And the short version is I hate them. I hate them because they are too good. The Aasimar, in addition to having no negatives, literally no negatives, +2 wisdom, +2 charisma, no negatives, they also have an alternate heritage table, and it's literally just pick where you would like your 2+2s to go. And like it's not totally freeform. There's not whatever 36 different uh, heritages to make every combination of +2 to this and +2 to that. But there's no downsides. It's all pluses. Um, and each one gets a different spell-like ability. So on top of getting your good stats, getting bonuses to different skills, you're going to get different once per day spell-like ability. And this one is just straight to Summon Nature's Ally 2, which, okay, over the long haul, Summon Nature's Ally 2 is not a big deal, but at level 1 and 2, you can't normally cast Summon Nature's Ally 2. At 3 and 4, it's the appropriate spell level, and at 5 and 6, it's only one behind, which is often the version of the summon spells that you use anyway, just for efficiency's sake. So it's kind of like above or at the appropriate power level for the first 6 levels of the game. It's not until level 7 that really starts to be noticeably lagging behind. Whatever. This is how I basically feel about the Aasimar in general. They are just bullshit tier. Which isn't to say that I never play them, because occasionally I do play stupid bullshit. But generally speaking, when I make a character, I do not consider the Aasimar at all. If there's something for which I feel they're actually thematically appropriate, or if I just decide I'm going for broke, I'm going all out, and I want that bonus layer of cheese on my character, that's when I break out the Aasimar. Generally speaking, on a scale from 1 to 10, I feel like Aasimar is an 11. And so I just I try not to touch him. In that same vein, you have Tiefling. Tiefling is less problematic in my opinion, because you do get a -2 to something, which is good. I don't think they're balanced though, because it's 2 dex, 2 is, -2 int. So there's 2 bonuses and 1 negative. And I feel like if that was 1 and 1, it would be better, because just like the Aasimar, you get a spell-like ability every day. You get your bonuses to your skills, and the spell-like ability, like Hideous Laughter, as a spell-like ability, that's not bad. It's pretty good. I'm not, and there's a lot more different kinds of heritages here. But again, it's not so many that you can literally get whatever bonuses you want. But you can get mostly the bonuses you want. And since most builds are only really primarily dependent on a single ability score, you can kind of get what you need out of this. So if the Aasimar is an 11 on a scale from 1 to 10, because fuck those guys, I feel like the Tiefling is a 9, right? And I'm much more willing to play a Tiefling than I am an Aasimar, but in general, the same sort of self-restriction applies, unless I am purposefully being cheesy, or maybe it's just a very particular concept that I think works well with the fiendish blood background. I try not to use these guys. Most of the rest of the stuff on this list, with a few exceptions, but most of it I would not entertain. I often wish I could come up with a good idea for Android. They just really clash with my idea of how D&D works. If I was playing a game that I felt was pretty beer and pretzels, I'd probably go for it though. I actually do have an interesting concept character for a drow or drow noble. Um, yeah, it's whatever. I think there's an interesting concept to be played there, but just like the tiefling and the Azamar, these guys go to 11. I mean, the stat modifiers are ridiculous. Dex +4, Int +2, Wiz +2, Chow +2. Oh, but Con -2. And then they get a bunch of racial abilities. They get a bunch of spell-like stuff. It's yeah, you can't. Um, I do like the Kitsune. I think they're very reasonably balanced. A lot of their more outrageous stuff is locked up behind racial feats. So it's fine. They get some shape-shifting built in. I think that's neat. Um, I like the Suli, which is just a slightly different elemental humanoid. Um, I like Svirfneblin, but generally not for players. Um, the Wei Yang, it's just a slightly different planar humanoid. This is the plane of shadow instead of an elemental plane. That's all fine. I do actually find myself looking at the Tengu, and I wish the Tengu had the same set of shape-changing properties that the Kitsune did. Because the Tengu can change shape, but only lasts for like 10 minutes a day or 10 minutes per level per day or something like that. It's insufficient. I really want to take a Tengu and just have a long nose human form. I basically want to be able to turn into Usopp for One Piece. Um, Other than that minor quibble, I like the Tengu just fine. Um, so yeah, it's mostly. I definitely have some favorites. They tend to be things that I have used in builds before and had them work well, um, or had them be fun. And as a serial optimizer, as I often claim to be on the subreddits, um, it probably seems like it clashes with my ideal to be like, oh, that one was more fun. But the reason I optimize is because I find putting all of that stuff together, all of the bonuses from race and class and whatever magic items, to be fun, right? So this whole exercise um, is dominated by the things that I find fun. So if that means that uh, being a Tengu or a Ifrit or a Kobold is um, slightly less powerful, like I'm not going to take a Kobold and make a melee fighter out of him, right? That's silly. Um, but if I was making a sorcerer already, and I went, it would be fun if this guy was a Kobold, I might go for it. Or if I was making a rogue, or if I was building a sniper, um, and I was like, yeah, it would be fun if this guy was a Kobold for whatever reason. I might go for it instead of something slightly better, like one of the elemental bloodlines, just as an example. Um, so that's it. I think I basically talked about how I feel about the races. I start with the assumption that I'm going to be human, and then I try to see if there's anything whose racial abilities make it worth to trade a feat, or possibly more feats if I'm going for something like Kitsune, which has a handful of interesting racial feats, or Skinwalker, who I find is really supported by at least one additional feat very well. Um, and yeah, is that it? I think that's it. So I'm just going to go ahead and give that a stop. It says I only did 24, we'll call it 25 minutes this time. So we'll see if that works a little bit better. Again, if that was fun and or interesting, let me know.